Flames clawed at the night sky as my house burned to its bones. The HOA president stood across the street, pretending to mourn, his phone glowing in his hand. They called it an accident, I called it what it was. A message. And they had no idea who they'd just provoked. Before the fire, my world was quiet. I'd spent 30 years on the federal bench, and retirement was supposed to mean peace, long mornings with coffee, books stacked on the porch, my wife tending to her roses. We moved into a small lakeside community called Cedar Bluff Estates, drawn by its calm streets and trimmed lawns. Neighbors smiled politely. They waved, but behind those smiles was the faint, perfect tension of people who cared more about hedges than humanity. The Homeowners Association ran everything, or so they thought. Within a week, envelopes began appearing in my mailbox. Welcome to the community. Membership is mandatory. Inside were glossy pamphlets listing rules, lawn height, mailbox color, even curtain shades. I didn't sign. I didn't need another system of authority in my life, I'd spent decades living inside one. At first, they were civil. The HOA president, a man named Gerald Moore, visited one afternoon. Judge Harper, he said with a grin that didn't reach his eyes, we expect 100% participation. It keeps things orderly. I told him, order doesn't come from paperwork. It comes from principle. He left smiling, but that smile carried a warning. From that moment, the quiet neighborhood began whispering my name. The letters turned into fines. Fines into threats. One morning I found a bright red notice stapled to my fence, non-member properties subject to review and removal of privileges. Privileges? I hadn't asked for any. Then came the sabotage. My mailbox vanished overnight. Trash appeared on my lawn. A neighbor I barely knew stopped walking her dog near my property. Rumors spread that I was dangerous, unstable, even senile. I'd seen intimidation before, from people who thought power came from signatures and seals. I recognized the rhythm of a coordinated campaign. My wife grew nervous. Maybe we should just pay the dues, she whispered one evening. I shook my head. If I give them that inch, they'll own the mile. At the next HOA meeting, I decided to attend. Gerald stood at the front like a preacher before his flock. We maintain community standards, he announced. Those who refuse make life harder for everyone. When I spoke, the room fell silent. Community, I said, isn't built on coercion. It's built on respect. I walked out to muffled laughter and felt every pair of eyes burning holes in my back. By the time I reached my car, someone had keyed Outcast across the door. Still, I stayed calm. A judge doesn't react, he observes. But each day, I documented everything, every note, every fine, every face. I didn't yet know how far they would go, only that they were crossing a line they couldn't uncross. It happened on a Thursday night in March. Rain had stopped hours earlier, the air carried that damp, electric stillness before disaster. I was reading when the smell hit me, burning plastic, faint but sharp. Then came the pop of glass, the roar of flame racing up dry siding. Fire! My wife's voice cut through the crackle. We barely made it out. I grabbed her hand, pulled her toward the back door as heat pressed against our backs. Outside, neighbors stood in nightclothes, phones raised, faces lit orange by the inferno. And there, across the street, was Gerald Moore, arms folded, pretending concern. He whispered something to another board member, both glancing at me before walking away. The firefighters fought for hours. By dawn, nothing remained but a blackened frame and smoke twisting into a gray sky. Investigators arrived mid-morning. Looks like an electrical short, one said. But my gut told me otherwise. A week later, I received an anonymous note in my mailbox. Maybe next time you'll follow the rules. That was their mistake. They thought the fire destroyed everything I had. What they didn't know was that the safe in my study, the one built into concrete, survived. Inside, my flash drives, case notes, and a lifetime of understanding how to uncover truth. I drove downtown that same day, filed a private request for forensic support through an old contact at the bureau. Nothing official yet, just curiosity, I said. 3 days later, I got the call, "Judge, that wasn't a short circuit. We found accelerant residue under the floor beams. Industrial grade." Silence on my end. Then, "Thank you. Don't file it yet. I'll handle the rest." I hung up and stared at the ashes of my home. The law would speak soon, but first, I wanted to listen to what guilt sounded like. I moved quietly. Old habits die hard. I began collecting every digital trace of the HOA's dealings: emails, invoices, maintenance records. Using open access databases, I cross-checked vendors. One name repeated: Pinecrest Maintenance LLC, a shell company registered to Gerald Moore's brother-in-law. Then I found payments labeled community safety enhancements, transfers large enough to buy gallons of fuel. Through my bureau contact, we traced a delivery receipt for fire accelerant made 2 days before the blaze. The signature? Gerald Moore. The pieces aligned like courtroom exhibits. But instead of anger, I felt precision, the quiet satisfaction of a puzzle completing itself. I shared everything with the FBI. They opened a covert investigation under the Arson Task Force. Agents surveilled meetings, intercepted emails, followed money. What they found went beyond my house. The HOA had been extorting multiple residents, inflating dues, pocketing thousands. Still, I stayed silent. On the surface, I played the grieving homeowner, rebuilding permits in hand. Inside, I drafted motions, warrants, and affidavits, pre-signed by judges I'd mentored. When the Bureau finished gathering evidence, I requested one favor: let me be there when the truth lands. They agreed. 2 months later, the HOA scheduled a mandatory compliance meeting. I attended in a plain suit, carrying a folder. Around me, smug faces whispered. Gerald called the room to order. "Before we begin," I said, standing, "I'd like to address the board regarding the recent fire." His grin widened. "Judge Harper, we've moved past that incident." "Indeed," I replied. "So has the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. And the Federal Bureau of Investigation." Confusion rippled through the room. I laid the folder on the table, flipped it open with photos of receipts, fuel drums, forged signatures. "That's slander," Gerald sputtered. "It's evidence," I said. "And your contractor is already in custody." Right on cue, the double doors opened. 2 FBI agents stepped in, badges flashing. Gasps filled the room as they cuffed Gerald Moore and 2 board members. Gerald turned to me, eyes wide. "You set us up." I met his gaze, calm as ever. "No. You set fire to justice." I just turned on the lights. As they were let out, neighbors stared, some shocked, others relieved. One elderly woman whispered, "Thank you." I simply nodded. That night, news vans lined the street. The headline spread fast: "Federal Judge Exposes Corrupt HOA Arson Ring." The same people who once avoided my gaze now stopped by, offering help, apologies, and homemade casseroles. Irony never tasted sweeter. Months later, I stood on the porch of my rebuilt home. Fresh paint, stronger beams, fireproof siding, and peace. Reporters asked how it felt to lose everything. I told them, I didn't lose anything worth keeping. Justice had done its work. The HOA was dissolved, its funds redirected to rebuild damaged homes. Gerald and his accomplices faced years in prison. As I watched the sun sink over the lake, I thought about the word authority. People chase it through titles, badges, committees. But real authority isn't forced, it's earned by doing what's right when no one else will. They tried to destroy my home to teach me fear. Instead, they taught an entire neighborhood what justice looks like when it refuses to burn. I turned off the porch light, smiled at the quiet street, and whispered to myself. Order restored.